To all of our staff at Valley Vision for what they do here and putting it together. Making sure that we're convening people and connecting with people from not just local government, our joint powers authorities, our business community, our agricultural community, and also our community neighborhood partners. I get to be here. I was asked to be here in my role as our region's representative on the California Air Resources Board. But I get a few roles here that I get to talk about. One, I get to serve as a council member, and I'm working directly with neighbors on a daily basis. And before I move forward there, I do want to recognize the council members of this area here. I see Council Member Sarah Quijano over here. Let's give her a big round of applause. Thank you. From Folsom. Thank you for having us at your city. And I also want to welcome the newest member to the council, who's been an advocate for clean air and making sure that we have good stewardship. And she is the president of the Sierra Club right now. But Councilmember-elect Barbara Leary, let's give her a big round of applause. She was telling me that she actually resigned from being president of the Sierra Club, but no one would take the role, so she decided to run for council to get out of the Sierra Club. But no, I do want to thank them because at the local level, it is a significant amount of work. And in our role as council members, we serve on air districts, and so I do want to thank the air district staff that's here, our Air Pollution Control Officer, Erik. Let's give him a big round of applause here as well. We have staff from not only Sacramento Air District, but Yolo Solano Air District, and from our areas here. And the reason I bring all of this up is I grew up as a farm worker in Yolo County. And one thing that we know is the impacts of poor air to people who are working outside. The impacts of poor air when we have ag burning, and those of us that remember the days of the rice burning that would occur in Yolo County, it would go through Sacramento County, and then they'll just hover up in the city of Placerville, and you'd think you were in a foggy day, but it was just a smoky day. And the thing is, all through that time, the impacts of air and public health were affecting everyone, regardless of political boundaries or lines or jurisdictions, and the cost to public health is significant. And the long-term impacts to public health were significant. Kids growing up with asthma, and I remember as a kid, without notification at the time, the ag burning on across the street from our house on the intersection of County Road 86 and 23. And we would never get notified at that time. But we've done a big effort of working with the ag community, working with the workers and those about how we move forward. And today's conversation, again, I want to center it on the need for public health. Because there's essentially, we are discussing today the three things that are essential for life. Without water, life cannot exist. Without food, life cannot exist. And without air, life cannot exist. And all of us are affected by that. And biomass, the conversation of how we manage our fuels, affect all of those three key things. We know that all the work right now, even though you forget the fact that it's directed by us through the scoping plan that the California Air Resource Board approved of making sure the natural and working lands are a factor in our solutions, we know that if we have a forest fire, all of the work we're doing on electrification, on making sure that our stationary sources are reducing their emissions, that our cement plants are reducing their emissions, all of that with one forest fire can blow all of that work away. We also know that the challenges that when at the end of a season, an ag season, when our nut farmers are finished with and ready to prune, that their options are very limited, whether to chip and mulch and compost, or to burn their prunings. And I'll remind folks about a person who was ventured in Sacramento in this area quite a lot, Mark Twain, who had a comment about land and that they're not making any more of it. So the issue of composting, not only on water effects, on land effects, those become issues. And the issue of also food security, the cost of being able to actually maintain our agricultural resources are getting tougher and tougher, to the point where some of our farmers are pulling their orchards and their trees, and the land is becoming fallow. And unfortunately, that land all of a sudden now becomes much cheaper and much more available for development and housing development, and it becomes less of an incentive to do the infill in communities, and green sprawl, green build becomes a much more viable option for development because the land becomes so cheap. The benefit of us today here, what I challenge us today here through the conversation of biomass, is how we not look at just air quality as a myopic point of view. That we not look at our air solutions as only one solution or another, but that biomass allows us to protect our forests so that we can avoid these major, intense, hot forest fires that create this immense amount of flooding and flash floods that destroy the land, the ability to grow again. That we can also have fuel challenges, and most recently, very controversial, but the California Air Resources Board continued and passed the low carbon fuel standard amendments that allows us to look at biofuels. And so now what would be a waste and a cost in our forests that we need to pull out the wood can be used from biomass to hydrogen or cellulose ethanol or other ways to be able to avoid having to use diesel trucks from coming out of the forest and into our suburban and urban areas where the air quality is already at its worst. And not only that, but the fact that if we can use this technology to help our farmers reduce their cost and to reduce their ability to reduce and encourage them to continue to farm, to continue that heritage that we've had in California, then we will not only be able to maintain affordable food prices, we are able to maintain the work for workers in our areas, but we're also improving the air quality by using the technology to protect our forests, as well as making sure that we're helping our folks in the farmland. So I want to thank everyone for being here. I think what's exciting about this conference today is that we are getting the information out to dispel myths, to look at innovative ideas, and for us to make sure that we're finding solutions that are going to improve, number one, public health, and for us to be able to work as a region together. Excited to be here again, and more importantly, excited to be with all the thought process of folks here today. And another big round of applause for all our partners here at Valley Vision for putting this together.
It was actually my very first week at Valley Vision in 2021, where I first met Councilmember Guerra at our time at Justice and Jobs Summit, our very first one. So thank you for continuing to be such a champion for our region. And next, I will welcome up to the stage Martin Twer to give a little bit of Biomass 101. Martin is a Biomass Program Director at the Watershed Center. Woo, woo, woo!
Good morning. Yeah, Martin Twer, Biomass Program Director for the Watershed Research and Training Center. My organization is up in Trinity County, so further north. I am based out of Nevada County, and my work is mostly around anything related to forest biomass utilization. So I'm glad that Erik could touch on the ag part of it, because that's not really my forte. But I will try to address some of this. As background for the Watershed Center, it started 25 years ago when the local sawmill went kaput and went out of business. But it's a small community. It's one road. If you blink, you drive through it. But there were a lot of folks that had expertise that had livelihoods, and they were trying to figure out, okay, what do we do now? The major employer is gone, and it has grown ever since. Now we do a lot of work on the local scale, trail maintenance, fuel reductions, agreements with the Cal Fire and Forest Service. But we have, I work statewide, but we have folks who work on the national level as well. And so, and then Kathy threw me into this with, well, can you talk about biomass in general? I said, I'll see what I can do. So what is biomass? And I tried to Google it. And maybe you've noticed every time you put something in the search engine these days, it comes up with an AI response. And I said, well, I refuse to have AI put my entire presentation together. But there were some ideas. I said, okay, that's generally accepted terminology. So here we have the Energy Information Agency. It's organic matter, and we can burn it or gasify it or make it into liquid fuels. So that's a pretty broad term, and it's organic material, so animals, plants. And it's becoming an increasingly larger component of our circular economy. For the longest time, and maybe if you talk to farmers, if you talk to ranchers, they figured that out a long time ago, that you just don't throw stuff away. You use what you can, and because then it doesn't become a cost, it becomes a source that you can utilize for your processes. But we're beginning to deploy that on larger scales. We have bioenergy plants that utilize some of this material. We're talking about compost, and so it's a renewable resource. And then I learned about this term, if you can't grow it, you have to mine it. And I think this is a really term of the mining industry. But I think we can just flip it around, and it still holds true. And so all the materials that we can actually grow on the landscape, be it agricultural products, grasses, trees, we don't have to dig up something and utilize it. It just keeps coming back if we do it right. So there's a variety of sources of biomass, trees, firewood, for example, and energy crops, so crops that are specifically grown because we want to utilize them as a form of energy. That can be woody biomass, so there are willows, for example, in other parts of the country. Corn, rice stalks, rapeseed, these can all be processed into an energy source. Algae, and then landfill waste. And that's, I think, is still a challenge. How do we utilize this in the cleanest way possible? But landfill sites are massive. They continue to increase, so how can we utilize some of the material that goes in there, again, to bring it into the circular economy? Depending on what you put in, you need a different process to get the energy product out of it. So there's the dry part, the lignocellulosic materials, that's usually a thermal and then thermochemical process. That's your wood, that's grasses, and then there's the wet part, your ag waste, and they just have a different process. That's the anaerobic digestion. I put landfill waste in the middle because it can be either, it depends on where your material comes from. Right? We have now legislation that you can't put organic waste in the landfill anymore, but whatever comes out of a household can be a variety of material, right? It can be yard waste, it can be your eggshells and kitchen scraps. So depending on where that material comes from, what the consistency is, sometimes it goes into the dry process, sometimes into the quote-unquote wet process. This is what I found from Cal Recycle, the material that they recorded, that they took in. And just to give you an idea what kind of volume California is dealing with. So all this data is California. In general, I didn't find specific data for the few counties that we're talking about today, but this is all, across California. And different sources of this material. Some is the in-forest material, so that's your slash piles, mill residue, that's the light green. So what goes to the lumber, the trees that go to the mill, get processed, there's always something left over. Sawmill, sawdust, bark, and then agricultural waste, and whatever comes out of the urban area. What can we make out of this? It depends. I think electricity is what most people are familiar with. Then heating, cooling, right? Most people think about a combined heating or a combined heating power plant. So I make some heat, I make some electrons. I can add cooling as well. It's not that much more difficult. It's not much more complex. But then I have a combined cooling, heating, power facility. Renewable natural gas, transportation fuels, and Erik touched on it, the hydrogen production as well. I've been working with CAL FIRE on the next FRAP report, and while I was working on this is in general renewable portfolio standard eligible energy sources in California. And just to show how relatively small the biomass component is in this big picture, it's 5 or 6%, and it's been pretty consistent, but it has been declining over the last 2 years. The dots are the RPS, so renewable portfolio standard targets. And as you can see, California is not producing all this in the state. So some of this is actually coming in from as far as Alberta, Canada, from wind energy, and so maybe there's a potential to increase things stateside. This has been washed out. So this is, in general, what comes out of biomass power generation in gigawatt hours, and it's been around 6,000 gigawatt hours until about, what was it, 2014, but it has been decreasing since. Bless you. That's too bad. Well, this is a map of California with the different renewable energy sources across the state, and I try to zoom in to the counties that we're talking about here. The light gray one, that's small hydro, and then I think it's kind of reddish brown. That is actually the biomass generation in various counties. And you can see that even down in the valley, there seems to be small hydro and not so much bioenergy or biomass. This is data from the CEC. Oh my. Yeah, so in 2021, the height of COVID, there was a forest biofuels working group that was, I think, coordinated by the Joint Institute for Process Innovation, and trying to figure out what different pathways exist for forest biomass into the fuel process. Yeah, you can't see much. So on the left, on the far left, you see the drop-in diesel and gasoline, and we just developed maps on where are the pipelines, where are the power lines, where are regular gas stations, where are potential hydrogen stations, where are electrical charging stations. And so you can find the report online. Unfortunately, you can't see it much here. So we looked at the drop-in gas diesel. We looked at hydrogen with carbon capture and storage. So we included all the sedimentary basins across the state, former oil and gas fields. Where can we put carbon dioxide back into the ground that's coming out of industrial processes? Renewable natural gas, and then ethanol on the far right. This is a map of several forest biomass plants. Again, because I'm one of the forest youth and an ag person, we didn't include, again, this is for the FRAP report, we didn't include all the digesters in the dairy sector. And so, yeah, they're more or less located in the northern part of the state. But there are a few where we're here. And I think Chris will talk about it in the afternoon. So what can we do? What are opportunities? What are the existing challenges? How can we break this down to on the local scale? And so a variety of efforts are ongoing, right? There's policies, changes, there are regulations that are trying to move this ball forward. How can we compare, and Erik touched on it, if we burn it on the landscape, it pollutes the air, it causes health issues. How else can we utilize this material, actually make something out of it that we need as an energy rather than air pollution? So yeah, how can we continue to develop this? Are there other pathways that we can utilize? Are there other products out there that we can use? Biochar or black carbon being one of them to sequester carbon and again not to put it in the air. Yeah, we have hydrogen, sustainable aviation fuel. Some of this has been done already, at least on a smaller scale. Yes, there's airplanes flying across us, over us, that are powered with trees, if you will. And in the whole debate between renewable energy, between solar and wind and biomass, they have different characteristics, right? The solar, wind only work when the weather and the season is right. With biomass, that stuff is just there and we can utilize it. So that is firm power that can be utilized across the seasons, across the year, across the day, and can provide this firm power. And I think I heard it before, the filtration topic is a big one. Christiana is smiling. The ceramic filtration. How can we reduce emissions from existing bioenergy plants or power plants in general, and new ones? And so there are different technologies. One is the combustion pathways. The other one is the gasification. But how can we improve what we have and keep some of these facilities going, at least for a few years? Because they utilize a huge amount of material that, again, if we don't use it, goes up in piles, either slash piles, for scrap fire, or ag burning. So, and I threw this in there. This is a map that has been put together by UC A&R and the U.S. Forest Service. All these dots are current or former sawmill sites. So the red dots are all gone. So small sawmill sites over the last 50, 60 years that have vanished. Thank you. And so there used to be over 200 mills in California. I think we're down to about 24. And all these facilities could utilize, again, forest biomass, make something out of it, but we don't have this anymore. So now we have a few centralized plants, which includes we need to truck the stuff there, or we need to burn it on the landscape. Both sides produce emissions. So, and I see this as opportunities to see which of these sites do still exist in one form or another. Some are just parking lots or swimming pools or Walmart, but some still have some of the permits in place. Some of them still have a concrete pad left. So something could be rebuilt there and then to utilize some of this material again. And this was the part I was most excited about, because this is the beyond part. This is biomass and beyond. So these are almost 100 different wood products that you can make out of wood, out of forest biomass. I know. Yeah, so there's building products, right? Mass timber, cross-laminated timber, there's mineral bonded excelsior, there's insulation materials, there's furniture, there's posts and poles for the ag sector, for trail building. There are chemicals that can be made out of wood. So there's a whole range of other things than electrons or transportation energy that can be made out of wood and woody residue. And some of this can be made out of ag waste as well. But again, I'm not so well versed there. But yeah, so there's a lot of things that can be done utilize it other than make smoke. Thank you.
First of all, I want to thank Martin for his patience and our audience too. His slides that he sent to us were completely beautiful. This projector was moaning out a little bit, but we will be sending those slides out to folks to make sure you get that data. So thank you for your patience with us and for letting me turn the lights out on y'all for a little bit. But I want to invite up next to the stage Erik White, who is a air pollution control officer for Placer County Air Pollution Control District, for a little facilitated Q&A, and then we'll have some time for audience Q&A. Thank you so much, Erik.
Well, I'll second that. I looked at the slides last night. They are beautiful. You can actually see the outline of the state, but so my job this morning is to facilitate some questions for Martin. We here at the Placer District have worked with him for a very long time on biomass and bioenergy issues. So I am here to take your questions and see if we can get some answers that maybe weren't covered in the presentation, some things on your mind. Are we passing around a microphone? But I'm going to take one of your mics. We are sharing. So Martin, I'm going to ask a first question, and you know we've come a long way over the last 5 to 10 years, where if we had this, there would be maybe a quarter of the people here interested in this topic. So it's great to see that. Where do you see biomass in 5 years? If you had a crystal ball.
I think it's moving. It's moving forward. I mean, sometimes it's 3 steps forward and 1 back. I think we're still learning a lot of things. A lot of these technologies have been developed elsewhere and have been tried and tested elsewhere. Some of it comes down to, yeah, we need to import it to the US, to California, see how it works, and deploy it. So that's on the technical side. I'm talking mostly about Europe in this case. Again, they have been dealing with these issues for much longer. They've scaled it to where they would need it. They have runtime. They know what works and what doesn't. They've worked out most of the kinks. And so let's bring it in and run it and prove that it actually works in California as well. The other part is regulations, and yeah, I call it being open-minded and see what are the alternatives, what happens if we do this but don't do that. So sometimes it's a binary choice, sometimes not. And how can we improve on certain things? Yeah, but I think it's growing. And I think some of the charts I showed it, this decline in biomass utilization, I was surprised that it was that pronounced when I was working with this data. I said, well, yeah, I mean, a lot of, yeah, solar and wind sounds sexy, looks good, and batteries and whatnot, but that doesn't really help if we talk about forest health. It doesn't help when we talk about health effects on the population. I live in the Sierras. When things burn around us, sometimes LA gets beautiful sunsets, but there's a lot of bad things that happen in between, and having this understanding between people who live in the valley or on the coast, that what happens in the Sierras affects them as well, one way or another. And then it comes down to how can we funnel funds in that direction, because forest management is expensive. And we have Cal Fire folks here, they can probably give you the numbers for it, but it's expensive. But it needs to happen, and it needs to happen repeatedly. It's not a one-off.
Great. Questions in the audience for Martin? It's a subdued crowd this morning. There's more coffee, I think, if you need some. Thanks, Grace.
Thank you. I didn't see you coming. I've been following some of this as a member of the Sierra Club and engaging in a lot of the controversy about the byproducts when you're processing mass to create energy. And I'm clearly not an expert in this field, but I'm wondering where we are in terms of ensuring that we're not, producing other chemicals and releasing them into the atmosphere during the processing of biofuels. And I know that's a really broad subject, but if you could maybe hit on the high points, that would be helpful.
And some of this comes back to what is the alternative, right? If we have wildfires, if we have pile burns, if we reduce fuel on the landscape or ag burning as well, these are more or less uncontrolled processes. And we don't even know and count the chemicals that are released in this process. If we move it to a facility and make products out of it, be it electrons, be it chemicals, be it wood products, yes, there will be some emissions, but we have much better control over these emissions and the amounts. We can actually count them, we can measure them. And so that's where I see a huge benefit. And I know that Placer County Air Pollution Control District, Bruce Springsteen, back in there's the reports in the back, they compared, they counted it, what is the emissions compared between burning a slash pile versus bringing it to a bioenergy plant. And that includes transportation and everything else. And the numbers are staggering, how much we can reduce between pile burn out in the landscape, be it a wildfire or a pile, and alternative use. And energy is, again, I try to show it, energy is only one piece of it. It's different if it's a combustion plant or if it's a diesel, gasoline pathway, is it hydrogen? So something will be emitted. We can reduce it, we can control it better, but we cannot completely eliminate it. Yes.
All right. Rock, paper, scissors. To build on the last question, I'm wondering, it feels to me like there is an historic antipathy toward biomass in general. And to my knowledge, there's a great distinction between the very large biomass to energy facilities in the valley that deal with urban and ag waste perhaps versus the forest biomass facilities, often much smaller, that we're talking about in the woods. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about how we overcome this antipathy so that when we do finally have the opportunity to perhaps build a new facility, it doesn't get trashed by community opposition.
A lot of it is education and having meetings and get-togethers like this, right? So that we can talk about what's happening and what are the alternatives. And I think a lot of the pushback still comes from, I don't know, the timber wars in the 80s. There's still these preconceived notions that, yeah, it will be clear cuts just to make electrons. But that's not happening. I mean, California is growing more wood fibers than it's using. And yeah, educating and informing people about different technologies. And yeah, you mentioned the bigger ones, they call them old style combustion in the Central Valley. But they've done better. They have been improving. They continue to improve what's technologically possible. And then there's other technologies out there, right? Gasification, pyrolysis, that is a different process. It's the thermochemical process that I mentioned. They're smaller. They're 2 megawatts, 3 megawatts. These are facilities that can actually be brought into the woods where the resource is. We don't have to move the stakes to the plant along I-5. We can actually move the plants and convert wildfire material, fuel reduction material into desirable products that we need on site, on a community scale, and the impacts are much, much less. And again, it comes down to education and, yeah, not just repeating talk from 30, 40, 50 years ago, because things have moved along significantly.
I was going to have a question about community and how the community around you and your experience taking it. But on my experience, I'm Gloriamar, Gamez from Stanislaus County. Well, I don't represent the county, I come from that county. And the communities there, they are really, rightfully so, concerned about these technologies because of the emissions, but we have shown studies not made by us, some actually made by CAL FIRE and others, that compared to other technologies, you have 78–90% reduction on the other emissions when they can actually measure what it's compared with open burning. So yes, education and bringing it super down to earth into layman terms, because some of us are engineers, or why not, and used to more complicated language. But yeah, my question to you was exactly about community and how you have faced in your experience the community around this year as taking in this kind of technologies.
If they're willing to listen, I'm happy to talk about it. And there's a lot of very experienced folks out there who can break it down to layman's terms and show these are the alternatives. Do you want this or do you want that? And sometimes there's something in between, and sometimes it's not, just because of, it comes down to economics, right? You can't just upsize, downsize everything to an unlimited scale. And things cost money, and if you want to make these things work on an economical scale, in terms of labor force, we'll hear about more later, in terms of facility size, how to operate it, and these landscapes are huge. I mean, between CAL FIRE, or the state, and the federal government, an agreement to treat 1 million acres starting next year, every year, into the future, that's huge. These are massive amounts of, and that's treatment, right? It can be anything. It can be prescribed fire thinning, fuel reduction, harvest, anything in between. So, but these are vast landscapes with hundreds of thousands and millions of tons of material that we need to do something with. We can't just rearrange the fuel. That's not going to help anyone. So we need to do something with it.
I'm not on the agenda, but I'm going to take the facilitator prerogative to say a few things. To both those questions. I think there's a perception, perhaps in communities, that these facilities aren't controlled to the maximum extent that they can, and that would be an incorrect assumption on these. And I think there's also an assumption or perception that biomass to energy facilities are big, hulking, old, monolithic things that have big smokestacks associated with them. And the technologies where we are today on small-scale biomass, you heard Martin talk about gasification and pyrolysis, ceramic filters. There's a whole new technology, a whole new generation of opportunities here. And I think one of the challenges we have is how to make policymakers and communities aware of those opportunities. And to garner support. I'm certainly aware of the concerns in the Central Valley around, some of the biomass facilities there and the community's concerns on that. So it really is trying to change the perception of what we're talking about moving forward and moving away from these older facilities that were built in the 80s and 90s to the new ones that could be built, this decade into the next.
And maybe one last thing is, a lot of what we talk about is in the Central Valley and just the foothills of the Sierras, but a lot of people live really up in the hills. And I'm a big proponent of firewood. If you do it right, I could do a whole workshop on just how to do it right and eliminate and reduce emissions and have a nice toasty house. But again, it comes down again to education. And again, sometimes there's opposition to that as well. If we talk about electrify everything, no. But that's my opinion.
Thank you for being here, Martin. Thank you, Erik. I'm Tony Firenzi with Placer County Water Agency. I want to see if you can go a little deeper on the economics of using biomass. I'm familiar with, we've been pursuing a project and kind of understand the numbers a little bit. And, just to give an example, we kind of estimate hauling material out of the forest to where we want to use it is in the range of $100, maybe $200 a ton. That unfortunately is just a little too expensive for the economics to work on the available markets right now of doing something good with that material. It's close, 100 maybe is close, 200 is off. So I'm curious your opinion. Do you think innovation might get us there? Ideas on how to make things more efficient, maybe scaling up. The projects we've been looking at, ours was going to be 3 megawatts. Maybe that's just too small for a scale economy. Or do you think there needs to be some sort of economic policy to underwrite the gap? Do you have any opinions about that? I'm just curious.
It's a little bit what was first, the chicken or the egg? I think innovation is one part, adoption is another. As I mentioned before, some of these things have been invented and have been proven. So we just need to install them and run them. Sometimes sizing up does make sense, scaling up. Sometimes you just need more of the smaller units and more distributed in the landscape, among communities. Right, bringing the technology to the resource rather than the resource to the technology. So it depends. It's locally different. Transportation distances are not all the same, right? If I'm on I-80 is one thing. If on a forest road is a very different story, even though it's just 5 miles. So it depends. But we have done a lot of good feasibility studies with all these different variables for certain areas, but again, it's always very local. You cannot do this for, okay, we just cover 6 different counties and do the math for that. And no, I need to know more, where could I locate a facility and then run the models, then run the math. And some of this is happening, so, yeah. Does that answer the question, or was that too?
It does. I'll just say I think there is a need for economic policy that perhaps underwrites some costs. I may just one word on that. I think we have I guess people weren't here.
Yes, it did. I do think, at least in the near term, maybe over the next decade, there's a need for some economic policy at state and federal levels, depending on the landowners and that kind of thing, to underwrite some costs. As an agency that works in fuels reduction work, I think there's a responsibility when you go in and do a construction project, and these are at some level, even though they're ecological forest health projects, they are a construction project. I don't do a demo project on a building and just leave my crap there. Sorry for that word. I think there's a similar responsibility on forest health work. The problem is that there's a threat to the pace and scale of forest health work if you add that burden of cost. And so I do think there's a need for economic policy to maybe close this gap, at least until innovation can catch up.
Yes, and finding revenue generating products and processes, right? We cannot rely into perpetuity on CAL FIRE and Forest Service funding for this. I mean, that's a dead end. I mean, we know how state and federal budgets fluctuate. So how can we put it on a more solid, steady footing? It might not cover all the costs, but at least complement some of these grant funds, which are, highly volatile.
Thank you for that. We're going to have about 5 more minutes for some Q&A, but while we do that, our team likes to make sure we have as much audience participation as possible and can get some information from you all and learn your perspective. So while we continue Q&A, we're also going to do a Mentimeter activity. On all of your agendas on your table, there's a QR code that you can scan, or if you are on a laptop or want to pull out your phone and manually type it in, you can go to menti.com and use the code you see up on the slide deck there, 711593, and type in your response to the question, what opportunities do you see for biomass in the region? And I believe we have a question up here in the video.
Councilmember Guerra has a question, yes, thank you.
Yes. From following up on that, on the economics, how realistic are mobile gasification units? And maybe is it is that maybe there isn't as much a need, say, to build facilities and go through the siting and permitting and all the challenges that have that, versus units that follow a crew around, you know, to achieve the same work. I mean, do you have any thoughts on that?
It's great stuff. I put a whole document together with mobile modular wood processing technologies, which is everything from a wood miser sawmill to gasification units. So where I see the advantage is if you can scale these things just by adding a unit or subtracting a unit. If your feedstock supply expands, you just keep adding units from 1 to 2 to 3 to 5. And if your feedstock supply dries up, you move the unit and bring it somewhere else. Works the same on the demand side. So I don't have to put tens of millions of dollars in the ground with a big bioenergy plant, or I mean even the smaller ones, the biomass size market adjusting tariffs that between 3 and 5 megawatts. They're expensive and they take a long time. And maybe some of you know that the biomass came on the books 11, 12 years ago. We still don't have a standalone forest biomass plant operating under this program after 12 years. And we're getting close every day now, I've been told. But it's expensive, it takes a long time. So having smaller units that can be moved around with the crews where the resources are. Again, you need to, if it's gasification, depending on what product you make, if it's electrons, you need to attach it to a wire somewhere, or have a big battery, put it on a truck and drive it around. But if it's gas, if it's liquid fuel, yes, it's doable. Is it always cost efficient? Maybe not, it depends. But yes, the technology exists and it can be done.
All right. Can you address the cost for generating biomass kilowatt per hour? I think as I understand it, it's significantly more than other sources. And so there's always that argument you're asking ratepayers to essentially subsidize forest management, which the counter argument to that is also society pays the costs, you know, regardless whether you're paying it out of the 0900 emergency fund or, you know, you're dispersing the cost amongst 20 million ratepayers. I don't know, how do you make that argument?
The argument is what you compare with, right? And I mentioned it earlier, solar and wind cannot do what biomass can do in terms of firm power, right? It's there, 24/7, 365. It doesn't depend on if the sun is shining, if it's summer or winter. It reduces the fire hazard. That's why we remove this material. And if you talk to folks in Paradise and other towns in wildfire footprints, they can probably see other values in that work. And so can you break it down to kilowatt hour? I don't know. It's hard. How do people in the Bay Area value clean air? If the Sierras burn, how much are they willing to maybe pay for this? That's a great econ study. But it's not a one-to-one to say, well, solar power costs me that much per kilowatt hour versus bioenergy, because bioenergy does a lot more things that a solar panel or a wind turbine does not do, or a battery.
Again, I'm gonna jump in. You know, wind and solar are the same place we are today with biomass. If you go back 10, 20 years, solar was not always cost competitive with natural gas. You know, the federal government, the state government, the utilities invested a lot of money to build up the industry to where it is today, where it is one of the least costly, you know, forms of generation there is. And so, but biomass hasn't, I don't think it's benefited from those same types of policies. And so it's somewhat, I don't call it an unfair question, but it's if we had put these three together, wind, solar, biomass, you know, a couple decades ago, we would probably, they may look similar, but this industry just hasn't had the same level of support that wind and solar has, and I think that's been to its detriment.
And we're bringing in renewable power from Alberta, Canada. I mean, that's a long wire. At what point does it make not sense anymore if you can utilize some energy generated from 50 miles up the road.
Our last questions. I can smell lunch, so I know it's here.
So I don't know, I might talk too long, but I got a couple things to say about this. So my name is Matt Cohn. I'm the District 5 Supervisor for Sutter County. I also serve on a local air resources board. And I remember the car fire. I remember Paradise too well. My community is right next door to Butte County. We had an operational evacuation center that our health services operated for several weeks after the fire. And those people were devastated. I believe 80-something people died in that fire. But the human toll for that fire was much greater than that. I went to the evacuation center several times, and these people were older. Most of them had no family nearby. Most of them were evacuated with a clothes on their back, if that. My doctor was one of their doctors that Sutter Health operated an emergency facility there to keep the care for those people. But he told me, he goes, Matt, they don't, not only do they not have their medications, they don't have their walkers, wheelchairs, nasal cannulas, oxygen machines, everything else they carried with them, they lost. And that fire did not just burn the forest. It burnt their homes, their cars. And when that burns homes and cars and mobile homes, you have astronomical air pollution problems that are unimaginable. That fire created enough air pollution for the next 10 years cars running. The whole 10 years. Now, my question to the citizens of California are, do you want to operate biomass plants to clean up the forest and stop forest fires like that to create, and I don't think we're going to do it because I believe that the climate is changing. I believe we are going to have more fires as time goes on unless we take corrective action to manage our forest better. And then part of managing that forest is using biomass. And those problems are not going to go away unless we deal with it. And I believe that the PUC needs to mandate to the utilities to buy biomass power at an increased price that ratepayers have to pay more money. But what is the greater benefit to society? Is it allowing these massive fires to create air pollution that's going to damage your health and my health, even if we're already near that fire, for the next generation? Because that air pollution, we all breathed that air, was so polluted for so long. You don't think that's going to affect health for the entire Northern California for the next generation? Absolutely. And there will be people who will die because of that, but we can't put a number on that. We don't know that number. But it is, there is a cost. And I'm a farmer by trade. We farmed along the Bear River for over 100 years. And until 5 years ago, we produced all of our product, our waste product went to biomass. Trees, stumps, roots, everything got shipped and sent to biomass plants. We don't have the biomass plants we had 20 years ago. We're a lot less of them today than there were then. So today, this is the first year that we've actually ground up an orchard and made it into biomass. 20 years prior, every orchard got done. Then for about 5 years, we went through a period where we couldn't sell any biomass because there wasn't enough demand. And the only reason why we're doing it right now is because the plant from Lincoln that burns it is buying the product, and it's only like 15 miles away. So it's very economical advantage. But the price is so low that a lot of guys don't want to even bother with it. And the processors won't produce it. It takes big, heavy machinery to make biomass. To grind up all these trees and make it into chips. So those are my comments, and thank you very much.
And I think those are great comments to finish on. Before I hand this back to Caitlin for our instruction. instructions for lunch. I just want to thank you, Martin, for being here, and a round of applause for Martin today.
Well, I appreciate both of your time in this great discussion, and want to thank you, Erik White and Tony, who also spoke, two of our steering committee members. Thank you so much. And selfishly, as an event organizer, you perfectly dovetailed into our case study section later, which I'd love to see happen organically. So thank you so much, and folks, please stay tuned for that after lunch. Speaking of lunch, if you can smell the wonderful Thai food smell wafting into the room, that is on our menu today. So if I can ask folks in just a second here to line up on the stage side of the room, our flag. We'll have about 5 more minutes for lunch. Please feel free to get seconds, and we will jump back together in about 5 minutes. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. How did we like the Thai food? Thank you. And thanks to our team members too. We really wanted to walk the talk and make sure we had all compostable materials and not just dump plastic into a landfill after this event. And the wooden forks particularly brought me a lot of joy, so I hope you enjoyed that as well. So thanks for joining lunch with us. And next, I want to welcome some of our panel members to the stage here in a moment. And each of these individuals will be giving a short presentation. And then sitting at this panel next to me, and we'll have some facilitated conversation. So I think first, I would like to welcome Gloriamar Gamez, Chief Program Officer at Beam Circular.
Hello, everyone. Evening. Nice. Everyone is awake. Don't fall asleep because after lunch is hard. So yes, I'm Gloriamar Gamez, and I'm very grateful to be here talking to all of you about what we're doing and our take on the circular bioeconomy. So, next slide. Here. So, who is Beam Circular? So, Beam Circular, well, we come from the acronym of Bioeconomy, Agriculture, and Manufacturing, and we're a regional initiative to create innovation around the circular bioeconomy in Stanislaus, San Joaquin, and Merced. We are a non-profit organization. We're based in Modesto, California, and our mission is to enable communities to advance economic prosperity and healthy environment for all by scaling up circular bioeconomy innovation. We were founded in January of 2023. We're a very new organization with seed support from Stanislaus County to facilitate the growth of the circular bioeconomy sector, again, in the whole North San Joaquin Valley. We collaborate with diverse partners to attract and nurture bio-based manufacturing across our region. And that makes, so we can make, what we want to do is use biomass waste, especially from the food and agricultural sector. Our approach focuses on investing in key enablers for the growing industry, and among of those key enablers are infrastructure, innovation, access to capital, workforce development, and a range of community engagement and collaboration activities. So just to give you an idea, these are, okay, I will come back to that. So far, we have been able to attract investment to our region and support for the development of innovation ecosystem by building a public-private stack of capital that includes local, state, federal, and private commitments. The funding currently is being deployed in many projects that I have the honor to lead, to a great team of humans across a range of programs and pilot projects, including support for entrepreneurs, businesses, education and workforce development, and community activities. It is important to note that we would have not been here without the specific key catalytic funding from the Stanislaus County, which directed part of his American Rescue Plan from his ARPA funds to our work to support the creation of quality jobs in our region. We have been able to leverage those $10 million that the Stanislaus County gave us and have attracted 5x more return of their investment to new resources to mobilize from the state, federal, and private sector. We're also recipients from the California Jobs First, and we're very honored for that. So, as part of our work, oh, this light came horribly, but I hope you can see some of the logos of our partners. We partner with universities, from UC Merced, state with the community colleges. We also, of course, collaborate very close with government, with local governments. We collaborate with a lot of industry and manufacturers, and also with the communities and agent community, and of course with capital investors. So why are we doing all this? And again, I'm going to talk, okay, this is not helping. I can keep going without the slide, but we'll have more fun with the slides. I promise, because it will make it more clear.
Can you see it there?
Okay, I can keep working, talking. Okay. So is the slide that has, that's the next slide, okay. Our strategy focuses on addressing some of the key barriers to scale technologies and companies that work to transform waste into valuable products. Many of these barriers apply to a very broad range of bioeconomy activities, whether you're making biofuels or chemicals or alternative proteins even. The key theme, the next slide. Next slide. Perfect. The key theme is that R&D and lab-based innovation has far outpaced the commercial manufacturing. In order to scale, to create jobs and enable a large quantity of biomass residues and waste streams from agriculture and forestry, we need support to scale, to bring these technologies to commercial scale of production. And sadly, honestly, the US has been far behind. We have not invested as much as other countries in some of the key pilot and demonstration scale of infrastructure that is needed to help firms to validate their technologies on the path to scale up. This gap is something that we're currently working on to develop scale-up capacity. So if you remember, and all of you had some chemical and some biology classes, you start in small scales. But if you need to bring, and you can prove that your bacteria or whatever you're doing functions there, but if you want to bring it to commercialization, then you go to larger scale, let's say 20 liters. If you're lucky enough and you get some grants, you go to maybe a national lab, that picture is from maybe PDU, and you do it in 300 liters. But that's not enough to have a venture capital invest millions of dollars and to go into commercial scale, which is then why you need, this is what we call the Valley of Death. And so we're planning to create an innovation campus in San Joaquin County to serve not only the Central Valley, but all California, to scale up these technologies. And so, more to come with that. Next slide, that's my last slide. So I was asked to talk about policy. So as we have nurtured our region's circular bioeconomy efforts, we heard from industry about their policies and regulatory concerns, and we also work with local government partners on ways to support and attract this industry. And here are some of the few policy enablers that we are excited to see, and we encourage both the regional and the state levels to work on them. The first one is regional and state sector prioritization on the circular bioeconomy. It is very important to name the bioeconomy as a target opportunity for California, so that the state and the regional levels can help align resources, strategies, and data to advance with this sector. We have a key opportunity right now to advocate the state across the region to support bioeconomy as a priority sector. This is a great area for cross-regional collaboration. There's papers that predict that the circular bioeconomy, or the bioeconomy, is going to be $4 trillion. It's a wave that is coming. So I keep saying this is a wave that we need to ride together and to shape it together. We need to address regulatory complexity on permitting delays. It's very important to streamline permitting processes at a local and state level for sustainable design by industrial facility, creating dedicated pathways for green lanes to fast-track bio-based projects. We need to nurture end markets and supply chains for bio-based products by implementing state and regional procurement policies that prioritize bio-based products, to establish financial incentives for businesses using bio-based materials, and to fund new end market development. It's important to support financing into the circular bioeconomy by developing the different funding mechanisms like green bonds or low interest loans programs, tax incentive programs that support bioeconomy projects, and to reduce the barriers of capital-intensive projects. Financing is also needed to support development of biomass supply chain infrastructure, like clean rails, and why not, to move the biomass, and enable feedstock access. And last but not least, it's very important to align state carbon regulatory programs. We need to work on have more workforce development and training, and of course data and measurement, because if we want to invest, the state and regional data collection is super important, so we can have good data and life cycle impacts, bio-based products, and we can have a statewide development of the circular economy, and we can track its growth. Thank you.
Woo.
Thank you so much, Gloriamar. And next we'll be joined by Kerri Timmer, who is the Regional Forest Health Coordinator at Placer County.
Woo, 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 woo. Thank you very much. Since we've been having trouble with the slides, do you mind advancing? Oh, perfect, thank you. Okay, so, yes, awesome. So I'm Kerri Timmer. I work for Placer County. I'm the Regional Forest Health Coordinator. It's a relatively new program at the county. We work really more on the large landscape kinds of projects. We have many other partners who deal with home hardening and community and neighborhood type work, but we're working primarily with the Forest Service and other of the larger land managing agencies to do forest health and wildfire risk reduction projects. And we work in partnership very closely with, obviously, those agencies, but also the Placer County Water Agency. Thank you, Tony. Because the county and the water agency co-own and manage the waterworks in Placer County. So, as you all know, water comes from the mountains, and so the areas that we work in, the headwaters are forested, and so there's a great deal of need for forest health and wildfire risk reduction in those headwaters areas to reduce sedimentation, which Tony has been paying to the tune of millions of dollars a year to deal with from previous wildfires. So that's kind of the genesis of the program. I'm here though to talk really about a partnership that the county and Placer County Water Agency are leading, and I have to look at this because I can never remember this acronym, but it's CalFrame is the project name for short, which stands for the California Forest Residual Aggregation for Market Enhancement Project. These are the people who just changed their name from Office of Planning and Research to, oh, that's on another slide. No, the Office of Land Use and Climate Innovation. So they really like to work with their acronyms and make it difficult for the rest of us in the world. But really what these projects are doing, there's 5 pilot projects, and we're looking at trying to improve supply chain logistics, and in this case, very specifically, the concept of long-term feedstock contracting, which is necessary to encourage investment, which is necessary to build new facilities and expand the bioeconomy market. So we are one of 5 pilot projects, and we are working across Placer, Nevada, and El Dorado counties, all of which are sort of these east-west counties that have a great deal of forested area in the eastern portion of the counties, and whose water agencies, and this will become important in a moment, whose water agencies are critically important and engaged in all of this work. And I just want to say, I want to be Gloriamar. When I grow up, who has $25 million to fund their project? So you are an inspiration. Thank you. Next slide, please. So we all know the need. All of us are doing work. The state and federal governments have committed to increasing the pace and scale of forest treatments across the entire state of California. At the same time as we're all trying to madly get money to do these projects, therefore create more excess biomass material that needs disposal, we have fewer and fewer places to take it. And I think had we been able to see more clearly Martin's slides earlier, we would have, I think we got the big picture here that all those red dots are facilities that have left us, and there's a very small number of green dots, which are the facilities that remain. And so this is really the crux of the problem. Which means that for those of us who are trying to reduce fuel load and trying to reduce wildfire risk, the material that we're trying to remove in that process either sits on the ground, which is maybe better than standing up, but it's still out there, it's still fuel. it can still increase the severity of wildfires should they come through. So that's not ideal. Sometimes we take it to landfill, which seems like a hideous waste. That's just a crazy space to fill up with chunks of wood. There's got to be a better way. Or we pile burn, or we try to pile burn, I should say, because pile burning is actually really difficult to do. Permits are extremely expensive. Our colleagues at the Air Pollution Control District, like Erik, that's not their ideal solution because it does still put smoke in the air. Not as much as a wildfire, but it still has issues. So those are the things that we're trying to address in this project. Next slide, please. So Placer County and PCWA, the water agency, we have launched this project to basically evaluate the potential for creating a hub of some sort that can connect those of us who create material because of the forestry work that we do with the people like Gloriamar is working with and others who want that material to create something out of it. Right now, if you're a project manager like I am, you'll hear more about that later, I have to go into contracts with sawmills, with biomass facilities, with loggers and haulers and all of that myself. I'm a medieval English lit major. I am not a lawyer. I know nothing about contracts. And so we're hoping that we can streamline this process so that people like me don't have to have that responsibility. We've gone through a whole bunch of work. We've talked to people in the community. We've evaluated potential like formats or models for these kind of entities. We've looked at possible funding mechanisms. And we do have a heavy body of research work that's available to you through the Placer County Water Agency's website. We have a number of reports if you want to dig into that data. Next slide, please. So what we have found out through all this research is, the good news is there's definitely interest in creating some sort of hub as we're talking about. There's especially interest if the hub can do more than just the contracting piece, if it can also provide other services that have been challenging, such as permitting and compliance, grant funding, grant administration, residential green waste disposal, and many other things. So as the hub idea evolves, the hope is that it could take on some of those additional services. We've definitely looked at and identified the amount of biomass that exists in this 3-county area, so we have a sense of what the feedstock availability could be. And Quijano, who's here in the room, has done incredible work with her team to identify potential entities or models for how this could work. There's so much information in just that little piece alone, but I'm going to tell you 2 quick things. Where we landed is probably a joint powers agreement or authority, one of the two. They're different. A joint powers agreement is an informal structure where entities come together, they decide they want to provide services together to service their constituents, they come up with their rules of engagement, how they're going to work together, but they don't create a separate entity. The other is an authority, which is a completely separate entity, and we can talk more about that in the Q&A. So what we think will likely happen once we start vetting this idea with our elected officials in the cities and counties where we're working, is we'll probably start with the Joint Powers Authority, and sorry, I knew I was going to do that, a Joint Powers Agreement, work together informally, develop relations, build trust, figure out what the right suite of services could be, and then if there's the appetite, then we might look at creating the separate entity. The good thing about a separate entity is that that entity takes on the risk. So instead of each individual county, city, special district who might be involved informally, the entity itself can pick up that risk, which makes it fairly appealing, although it does have a fairly heavy launch need for funding and for legal expertise and such. So I think the one other quick piece before I stop is that because this is a relatively new market area, those people who might be interested in investing, they want more assurances. It's volatile, it's risky, and so we're also looking at things like feedstock supply insurance, pricing mechanisms that can take some of that risk out. And really the bottom line is how do we ensure that all of the material that we know we need to get rid of because it's excess and it's fire fuel, how do we ensure that over time, in a fairly steady and consistent and guaranteed, predictable way, can we connect that material to the people who need it? So that's the purpose of the hub. That's what we've been working on. There's 4 other pilots doing similar work in other parts of California, and happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm sneaking up on our panelists here. It's not October anymore. Next, I'd like to welcome to the stage Elizabeth Betancourt, who is a Natural and Working Lands Policy Advisor with the California Department of Conservation. Thank you, Elizabeth. And my AV tech was lovely, but then let me know that the clicker just has a slight lag, and I completely forgot to mention it to you all. So feel free to use the clicker if you like, just a slight lag.
You have control. All right, Elizabeth Betancourt, Natural and Working Lands Policy Advisor at the Department of Conservation. It is an unconventional role for the Department of Conservation. This is a new space that the DOC is working in, and it's really exciting because it shows that the state is sort of breaking some barriers and the silos that we have worked in for, you're smiling, Erik. We're trying. In the silos we've worked in for many years, so hopefully this will show a little bit of that. So I just wanted to emphasize, I'm sorry I came in late and I missed, Martin, if you mentioned this earlier, but it's really an important message, and I'm just going to reinforce it if it was mentioned earlier, that the point of biomass utilization is not the products that come from biomass utilization. The point is forest health. That is our objective, to mitigate wildfire emissions. So I just wanted to drive that home in case that wasn't mentioned earlier. Yeah, Martin, when I saw your slides, I was worried about this one. Sorry, it's all good. At least we have the little, yeah, showing. So this graphic is from the draft wood utilization strategy, which is a document that was worked on by many brilliant people in this room right now. And this graphic demonstrates the pathways for biomass utilization that we expect to see in the coming 10 to 20 years. You will notice that clean fuels is pretty significant out into 2035. It is almost insignificant right now because we're just growing this thing, right? The scoping plan has a lot of really exciting objectives included in it that are specific to biofuels, and I'll mention those in a minute. You see that electricity is it does not disappear, still going to be important, but it does sort of shrink a little bit as we get out into the future. And that's because of some of what Martin mentioned earlier and Erik as well. Other uses includes a lot of those things that we couldn't see on Martin's slide, showing all of the biomass utilization pathways, things like chemicals and building products. And then, of course, lumber and other traditional wood products remain a pretty significant part of California's economy and wood utilization pathways. So I am a policy advisor, so I'm super wonky on policy. So I just wanted to identify some pretty cool programs that we have at the state of California. Many of you are probably familiar with BioMat and BioRam. Those are energy procurement mandates on the investor-owned utilities. SB 1440 requires the gas utilities to purchase biomethane as a growing portion of its gas supply for customers. The Clean Fleet mandate is part of what CARB has required in the past few years, and that's on local governments to electrify or perhaps use hydrogen in their fleets, from buses to transportation used for staff. So in planning, there's some cool stuff. I skipped the LCFS. Just as of last week, was that last week? They just voted on a new LCFS standard that does include a pathway for woody biomass sourced biofuels. Erik, I should have looked at you for that, sorry. Good job.
It's unforgettable day.
Yeah, I bet. That was a long night. Yeah, so super, super excited about that, and we hope that that will open the pathway as we have expected for woody biomass sourced biofuels. Lots of cool planning happening. The scoping plan was instrumental in opening new markets for energy development. I don't know if any of you were around in the last scoping plan, which would have been 2017, 16, 17, but it was really hard to integrate natural working lands in that conversation. The 2022 scoping plan update, whole different story. So lots of really cool bioenergy stuff in there. Bioenergy carbon capture is central to CARB's expectations for meeting our 2045 climate goals. We expect to see, if we follow the scoping plan pathway, a 1,700 times increase in clean hydrogen. That's huge. Thank you. And then in 2045, 90% sustainable airline fuel for all departure flights from California. So that's from almost zero production right now. I think there's one facility down in Southern California. So huge capacity to grow in these spaces. There is a comprehensive report on the applications and uses of hydrogen coming out from CARB in collaboration with other agencies. We of course have ARCHES, which is a billions of dollars investment into the state of California to build a hydrogen hub, and that should extend and impact the entire state so that we can all be beneficiaries, not just where the hub will be located down in Southern California. And then of course we have the draft wood utilization strategy, which I mentioned many of the folks here were part of. All right, so we also have some needs associated with wood utilization, and it's not all money. Of course, money is nice, but I work for the state of California, and I will tell you the budget has been really rough for about a year and a half now. So we are looking for other ways to facilitate biomass utilization pathways. There's a lot of things up here that probably others have talked about. I will say repeatedly I'm inspired by the work that's happening on the ground with this. So leadership of our air pollution control district. So Erik, Quijano, I just had a conversation with the San Joaquin district just last week. Leadership by Beam, circular investment of local agencies into these pathways that is absolutely essential to remind the state that these things matter to people on the ground. So I can talk about these things all day long, and it won't matter to anyone unless they hear from you. So really appreciate the leadership on the parts of local government and community advocates. Procurement mandates, we've talked about a biomat extension. There's also potential opportunities for procurement mandates on other industries, perhaps even the state. Conversations around biomass building of state buildings, for example, or biochar procurement by Caltrans. So different pathways for biomass development, the state can help in breaking investment barriers to that by de-risking the investment by providing an assured market for those products. So we're exploring some of that. There's some really cool things happening in partnerships and tribal leadership, partnerships with tribes and tribal leadership in bioenergy and forest health. I just heard some of it at my table where I had lunch. So really exciting things happening there. Tribes have authorities that other organizations and entities do not have. They have access to money, they have policy opportunities, so really fantastic opportunity to build partnerships and capacity there. And then communication, like I mentioned, on the part of local governments and community groups, that's really tied to that local government leadership. Yuba County Water Agency's investment in Camptonville was huge, but it wouldn't mean anything if they didn't also talk with policy leaders at the state. So really important to make that connection and to reinforce the investments that you all are making in time, money, and policy. And then public infrastructure investments. We've been talking a lot about building this new economy, but if, for example, the Sierra Fund in Plymouth County is producing hydrogen, who's gonna buy that? Right? That's really far from any conventional user. And so if the state can facilitate that purchase by supporting infrastructure, supporting policies that allow that to go through existing pipelines, that's something we're interested in doing, and we need to hear from you as to things that are holding your projects up so that we can integrate that into our policy framework. I
I missed one of my most important and exciting ones, the CEQA streamlining. That's something that comes up in every single forum I've worked in. That's something that this administration has been interested in. You probably remember the CEQA conversations of about 1.5 years ago, and we were talking about climate change and making sure that we can build the things we need to build to address climate issues. So that's something that we think we might have a path forward to streamline CEQA on old sawmill sites, for example, very specifically. So lots of opportunities there that we are actively working on. But again, I really appreciate your input and support. And that's it for me. Woo.
Alrighty, and finally, to help facilitate our panel, I'd like to welcome to the stage Lindsey, Nitta, one of our steering committee members, and also one of our We Prosper Together Leadership Council members. And Lindsey, I will pass this mic to you, and maybe we can get a little creative with sharing the microphone.
Yes, definitely. I think we can handle it. Oh, got one too. Great. Okay. Thank you so much for your presentations and the work that you're doing. We'll kick it off with some questions that we've developed, and then get to the audience questions, because I'm sure there's a ton out there and have some good discussion. So just want to jump right into it, and maybe we'll start with Elspeth here and work down the line. I know that you guys had a lot about this in your presentations, but maybe pick one of the biggest opportunities and the biggest challenges that you see for new and existing biomass utilization facilities.
So I do think that CEQA streamlining is one of the biggest opportunities. California is known more and more for being a state that is challenging to do business in. And we are scaring away not only the Elon Musks of the world, but also clean energy developers and innovative product developers, bioplastics. We don't want to be doing that. We want to be a good place for good, responsible, sustainable businesses. And so I think the focus on making it easier to permit businesses that we need and want to see is a good path forward. Is that the question?
Yes, that's great. Thank you. Great, thank you, Elizabeth. One thing that I didn't mention in my earlier presentation is something called Bioeconomy Development Opportunity Zones. And I know a couple of us in the room in El Dorado County and Placer County were looking at that as part of the CalFrame project. This is a very specific, basically a marketing tool. So a company called EcoStrat comes in and does an evaluation of a wide range of criteria. I think there's 88 actually. Criteria or characteristics to a particular place on the map where a community may want to site a facility. They come in and do this evaluation. They create a rating, almost like a credit rating, even using the same, AAA, BBB kind of terminology. And if your location, based on those criteria and evaluation, if your location achieves an investment grade rating, which I believe is BBB or above, then the company goes out and markets your community, your location, your benefits worldwide to developers and investors who are looking to build and site facilities of all kinds. So it's a very specific way, particularly for those of us in rural areas that don't necessarily have like the major economic development horsepower that some other areas have. It's a really specific way to get your location on the map and in front of the very people that are absolutely necessary for new facilities, new market development.
Thank you. That was great. Actually, our region was the first region to have a AA EcoStrat qualification. Yeah, so we were the first one in the whole state of California. So I think that's in the country. So yeah, we're very proud of that, and it does help a lot. So yeah, good that I wasn't even going to mention that. So good. I think a lot was said about the policies. I think one of the challenges is, again, how do we make sure that these because there's great innovations, great startups get funding. And I think you touched on a lot of things. One is to make sure that we have these long-term contracts. That's one of them. Of course, the CEQA streamlining, and also how do we make our projects and I'm gonna use sexy for venture capital, and bring the venture capital out of the Bay Area to our regions, our communities. California is more than San Diego and the Bay Area. It's so much more, and we need to attract those venture capitals again to streamline and to make it easy for them and attractive. And I think part of these public-private initiatives that the EcoStrats certifications of the world will help and make it happen.
Yes, please sign me
Making
up.
California easy to make business. Yes.
Please sign me up for that committee. I'd love to be part of that. So we kind of touched about it. I know I was with you. Really identified a lot of great funding and permitting changes and opportunities are happening at the state level. But wanted to see if you or any of the other guests see if other funding or permitting things at the state or even at the federal level we could do that would help support new and existing biomass sectors.
I think definitely tax incentives, and again, we were talking about renewable energy and why not. The only reason why solar and wind took off was because there was a lot of tax incentives, a lot of tax credits. So give credits, and I love that, the bioeconomy regions, and then by that, you're definitely gonna, see that, make it attractive, because right now, still fossil fuels and corn, which is where, as a biomass resource, a feedstock, we are going again, that's called the first generation of sugars. In my language, what we're doing is second generation of sugars. They are highly subsidized. So sadly, we do need some subsidies to scale up still.
I'll just very quickly say, power the mic. We've all talked about and know the significant gap between the cost of getting material out for purposes of forest health and wildfire risk reduction, and then the revenue that could potentially be generated from that material. And I think one of the places where we really fall down is we do not value the co-benefits of that material removal for public health, for recreation, for local economies, air quality, all of those things. We haven't been able to crack that nut to find a good way to be able to assess and evaluate and build into the calculus of these discussions those additional values. We're not, as everybody has said, we're not doing this to cut down trees to make electricity. We're doing this because we're trying to make our forests healthier, reduce wildfire risks, and we need to be able to account for that.
I want to just add the local level. I think there are some opportunities at the state level, but I just want to emphasize the importance of the local voice. So we were identified and allowed to apply for climate pollution reduction grant funding earlier this year, CPRG money. We did not receive the money. It's US EPA money. It was incredibly competitive, but the state had to identify priorities in our climate plan, our priority climate action plan, that they would then allow that agency to apply. And it was very competitive within the state too. And it was because of your voice and you all speaking out that we were allowed to apply for forest biofuels funding. So again, we didn't receive it, but it was because CARB heard from folks on the ground who want to see more bioenergy production in the state. So I just can't emphasize enough, even if you can't put money into a project, like Yuba County Water Agency or Stanislaus County, you can use your voice in different ways, and speaking with our decision makers in streamlining CEQA and permitting in your counties for projects you want to see.
Building off of that kind of local lens, I don't know if the other two panelists, if you have anything to add about something that locally happened with the jurisdictions or different entities that really catapulted or really supported your project to take it to the next level.
As I said, BEAM wouldn't be here without the Stanislaus County funding, but it came out of a 2-year process of planning, economic development planning, where literally both parties, red and blue, came to the table, all interested, and said, what do we need to do for our county? Because it was from the ARPA funding, and it was a very inclusive process from all different community members, universities, professionals, companies, why not? And okay, they identified key challenges in the region, like air pollution that was mentioned first in the first point of Biomass 101, right? When there's a lot of air pollution, particular matter, why not, for agriculture and why not? And also the challenges about half of our population doesn't make enough ends meet, right? And then say, okay, we have these challenges and we also have a lot of food processing, the largest winery in the world, and why not, and a lot of ag. Okay, what can we do with this to make it an opportunity? And it was a very specific identified trade sector, and because we have the county belief, all the cities in the county were working with the other two counties, everyone came to the table, and again, That's why we've also been able to capitalize so much resources, because we've been very specific, very targeted, but since the beginning of the planning.
Great, thank you. Sure. Along the line of catalyzation, I'd be remiss if I didn't call out our county board of supervisors. And for those of you here who are leaders in your cities or counties or districts, the county committed to creating this program 3.5 years ago, the Regional Forest Health Program. They have now funded 3 different positions. Nick Coleman, who's our registered professional forester, and we have an admin and finance senior analyst as well. That has, and me. And that has allowed us to meet with people like everybody here in the room, to take advantage of opportunities, to apply for grant funding, to reach out in the community and build relationships and collaborative groups who are now starting to identify projects that we can carry forward and write grants for. So, just a shout out that it kind of took that little push and that county investment, which in the grand scheme of the county budget is pocket lint, but it's really important to me and really important to this program, and it allows us to be here to be able to catalyze and leverage the work that you all are doing. So I would offer you to consider that and maybe carry that idea forward to your local decision makers.
Thank you. And one last question before we open up for audience questions. What would be the one big prediction you have if you could look at the biomass industry 5 years from now?
So I do tend on the Pollyanna side of policymaking. I will admit that up front, so maybe grain of salt. But I only see this growing. This answers so many needs and questions that we have in state and national and international government. And to the gentleman's point earlier about quantifying the cost of public health, we actually do have a number. Forest wildfires are costing us $3.1 billion a year in public health costs, and that's actually in the scoping plan. CARB did that equation. So addressing forest health, yes, some of these products cost more. They do. Bioplastics and new foods and energy from biomass, it does cost more, but it's partly because we have learned our lesson from the past 100 years and are now internalizing the externalities that we have put on the climate for the last 100 years. And so if we can, to Kerri's point earlier, if we can look at this in a way that, we will have less public health costs, we have a more inclusive economy. Biomass economies, by their very nature, have to be local because of how heavy biomass is. So a more inclusive democratic economy. We have climate change, we're answering climate change needs, we're improving air quality. So many things are answered by the bioeconomy that I only see it growing, and your work on the local level is very much helping us at the state level to create an environment to support that.
Thanks. I guess what I'd like to see happen, not convinced, I'm not making a prediction, what I'd like to see happen though is bigger picture. I would love for the state and federal governments, and I am putting this back on the state and federal governments, to backstop their commitment. They have committed to 500,000 acres of treatment each, every year, starting next year for however long it is. I don't see us getting anywhere close to that. We have a very difficult time predicting funding opportunities. We have a very difficult time understanding how funding will roll out, and therefore how we can line up pipelines of projects that can be guaranteed, foreseen, counted on, and used to develop this investment that we need to build more facilities. So, and with that comes staffing levels. I mean, there's great political will, there is amazing community engagement, there's even some money, but there's not enough staffing at the state and federal levels to support the partnerships that are being developed to do these projects. And I feel like until we have that, at that leadership level, it needs to come from both directions. It's definitely coming from the ground up. My county as an example in terms of investment into this program, but it needs to come from the top down. We need to understand how it's going to work, how it's going to roll out, how we can count on it, and how we can market and monetize it.
Okay, my take is completely different than these two amazing ladies next to me. So one bold prediction of biomass utilization in the next 5 years that I have, I would love to see 50% of the airlines using sustainable aviation fuel coming from secondary generation of sugars. That means from woody biomass and from food biomass and from ag biomass. That's what I would love to see. And by that, we will need to do a lot of great groundwork to bring that production of sustainable aviation fuel to all of our state, to all our regions. Because so the planes, there's no way to decarbonize the airline industry if it is not with sustainable aviation fuel. And a lot of the airlines have committed to that, but we still have to crack the commercial scale-up of those technologies, and I don't want it to be out of ethanol, sugar, corn. So I would love for it to be from SAF, coming from our regions.
Thank you so much. Okay, I think we'll open it for questions.
Absolutely. So kind of similar to before, we have some time for open audience Q&A. I see your hand raised. Thank you. And we also have another Mentimeter question, which is, what ideas do you have to advance sustainable biomass utilization in our region? And I will actually hand it back to our panel and let Adrian gracefully dance around the room with the mic.
Okay, folks, raise your hand if you have a question for our esteemed panel. Okay, all the way over there. Great.
Making you work for it today.
Raising your hand, keep raising your hand. There you are. Oh, our wonderful council member. All right, here you go.
So from my layman's perspective, it seems like the big challenge is how do you get the biomass from the forest or from the agricultural site to a facility, right? Or else you bring the technology to the site. Many of our communities have old railroad tracks that either are inactive or perhaps, like in the case of Folsom, maybe an occasional excursion train or something like that. Is there anybody anywhere in the state that is using railroad tracks, to your knowledge, to take that biomass to the facility?
Yes, I can answer that question. The Sierra something Railroad is run by a company that's also investigating biofuels development in Tuolumne County, and the rail runs from Tuolumne County, like Chinese camp area, down through Oakdale and to the Stockton Port. And so they have thought about utilizing that railroad, which they have full control over very conveniently, to transport biomass and potentially bioproducts. So they've thought about transporting hydrogen in the form of ammonia, so it could be used for fertilizer, and it's a safer way to transport hydrogen, and also could be turned into hydrogen at the end point. Yeah.
What I was going to say is that is one of my points. We definitely need infrastructure to support this growth, and of course, revitalizing or using our rail system is primary. And what cool it would be if we can run those rails with biomass, hydrogen, or things like that. Yeah.
Other questions? Raise your hand. All right.
Hello, I have a policy question, and the question is from like today's workshop, I'm hearing that everybody requires a lot of funding to do the projects that we need to do, but like programs like the LCFS where Californians pay for it, but we're allowing people from other states and other nations to come in and take advantage of what we have, and subsequently Californians are paying for it, but a lot of our programs, they're not funded because we don't have enough funding for them. So does it make sense for us to, in the future, prioritize California projects versus out-of-state projects or foreign projects? Because it's not helping us locally here in California. Thank you.
Yeah, so from the state's perspective, when the LCFS was developed, the thinking was in part, there's a stick there because there's interstate commerce law. So we can't put rules on something that would negatively affect or prioritize our producers that is impacting the entire nation's commercial opportunity. So there's a stick there, but then there's also for us, at the inception of LCFS, there was a carrot that we would be essentially exporting our values. So it'd be growing the climate resilience community around the world, essentially. I think that your point, sir, is very well taken, and it is something that the forestry community in particular has thought about. And specifically in the LCFS guidelines, and I'm looking to see if Erik is in the room. He would be really useful right now. But the LCFS guidelines that were just adopted include a stipulation that any woody biomass sourced biofuels must be sourced sustainably. And they have rules included that very closely map California's forest practice rules. California's forest practice rules are, alongside Maine's, the strongest in the nation. And so we, by default, by creating incentives for responsible practices, we preferentialize biomass from California. There also would be essentially a carbon tax on biomass transported from outside the state, so that by default would create preference for California biomass as well. But we have to get at that preference from other ways than just saying California preference. If that makes sense.
Thank you. Time for one more question. Here we go. And it's always nice when folks introduce themselves. We love knowing who's in the room.
Thank you, guys. I'm John Azevedo. I started a company called Forager Fuels, and we're set out to accomplish a lot of what we've discussed today about bringing some of the latest technology for gasification, air quality control, carbon capture, and energy creation into the forest in a more distributed manner, solving a lot of the transportation issues. The question I have is also around policy. Much of our forested land is Forest Service, and they have quite a different set of guidelines and restrictions on how much of this technology can be brought into the forest at the site of these operations to help eliminate all the trucking in our communities. How do you see us as a state and our communities working with the feds to kind of break down some of those barriers on federally owned land?
Yeah, I can take a stab at that first. So there are folks here in the room from El Dorado, and I know that El Dorado National Forest, because of the Caldor fire, has been able to engage with an air curtain burner provider and are looking at bringing, I think, 3 ultimately, 1 to start anyway, into the National Forest to deal with exactly what you're suggesting. I can also say that there is a group of us that has come from Placer County, but we're also trying to broaden out to Nevada and El Dorado counties going forward in sort of more of a regional advocacy voice, because any one of us can say these things, but it doesn't have nearly as much power as if a number of us are saying the same thing. And that is one of the key kind of planks to the platform, which is that, you know, given how much of our 3 counties at least are Forest Service land, Forest Service managed, it makes perfect sense for them to be somewhat of a testing ground for these kinds of technologies. And frankly, I can't speak for them clearly, but I think they have a great interest in getting this material out of the forest as much as we do, because it creates issues for them too. And so I think that they're starting to open up a little bit in terms of looking at that kind of thing, even if it means, in essence, supporting a private enterprise to provide that equipment. So I think we all need to keep hammering on that because it is critical. Unfortunately, they're still really expensive. Like an air curtain burner is somewhere between $10 and $20 million to get it established and in a location. But you know, if we could put together in fact, one of the services that we might be looking at with this hub, this aggregation hub that we're talking about, is that kind of thing where maybe we can lease one of these things and move it around between forests, you know, higher elevation to lower elevation based on season. So, you know, these ideas are definitely percolating, and I think the more we can all talk about them, the quicker we can get action.
Thank you so much. I know we mentioned that was our last question, but I want to just give our panelists one more opportunity if there's anything else y'all wanted to share before we part today for this portion. Any parting thoughts? From us? Yeah, from you all, sorry. That's important to specify, yeah.
I think a super important thing is, again, keep engaging also our local community. All these projects, I've seen a lot of projects fail or have a lot of issues when they don't include community from the start. So it's very important to have community conversations, to engage the community, to listen to the community needs, to make them feel part of it, to understand their concerns, to bring them to the table. That would be one thing that I believe is extremely relevant to all of what we're doing, all of us are doing. And to, as part of the education that Erik was saying at the beginning, and because education will make the difference, and they have the right to know. They have the same concerns we do on climate change and different topics. So education, and also to understand that, honestly, everything that humans do, everything has an impact on the planet. So we have to really make the effort to minimize the impacts and to compare again what's the paper that we're facing, and to be realistic, because all of us want mobility, all of us want to eat, all of us want electricity, and making all of the resources that we live in has a cost. So we really need to make a lot of life cycle assessments, technology, economic assessments to make sure that everything is feasible, and communicate that to the community and make the community part of it.
Excellent, thank you. Ditto. Absolutely. Placer County, again, just as an example, we have an absolutely robust Firewise community program. In fact, I believe we have the most of any county in the nation. That would be the big one, right? The nation, yes. So, you know, dealing at the neighborhood level is really important. People listen to their neighbors. If your neighbor on the corner is doing fuel management on their property, you're going to go, that's, wow, that looks really good. Maybe I should do that too. And you bring those people together, common interest, suddenly you're able to apply for a grant. Suddenly you're able to get this designation, which gives you other alternatives, which can also improve your insurance situation for wildfire insurance if you are part of a Firewise community. There's also fire safe councils. They're a little bit different, but they work at, you know, a larger landscape level than a neighborhood. These are the places where people get together and talk over coffee and wine and beer and food and salad and stuff, and that's where this information gets out. You know, they're not going to come to an event like this and sit and listen to people with a microphone. They're going to talk about it over their table with their neighbors and you know, help each other. So you're absolutely right.
I'm also going to talk about community, because it was a point that I didn't have time to get to in my slide, but as I've mentioned, the state is very clearly interested in biomass utilization moving forward. We know these projects are hard. There's a lot of barriers: cost, environmental impact, community involvement, and education. So if you need help in your community and getting a project going, we are here for it. I don't know that the state has always been as much of a resource as we should be, but we have amazing forestry experts and emissions evaluation and technology engineers and policy wonks. So we want to help you get your project going. So if you do encounter hurdles, please do reach out. We will expect that you will have done community outreach and are also happy to help you with that.
And I have to testify that we did a community event, a symposium in May 22nd. It was kind of weird because we had scientists, we had companies, we have state, we have government, and I have to say, people from the state came to our community event where we had a lot of, like it was more than 400 people. And we had really community members that we even paid for the transportation so they could come to UC Merced. And the state came and sat into the table and was part of the panel and all this discussion, so thank you. So I can testify, the state came and helped, thank you.
Gloriamar, you can't drop that bomb on us at the end. Now I have like 8 questions for you. I'm going to have to follow up with you. Well, I'm going to deviate from our agenda just slightly because we got a little bit excited at lunch. So we're going to cut our 10-minute break to a 5-minute break to stand up and stretch for your spinal health. And also, I see folks with compostable plates and different things that could potentially go into receptacles on both sides of the room. So we'll take a 5-minute break and stretch, and we will return with our workforce panel in 5 minutes. Thank you to our panelists. Appreciate
it. You guys are crazy, but thanks for coming.
Thanks for the walk. I'll keep you posted.
Workforce panel.
Schools are opening up early, right? Is that the good news? Wow.
Well, Heavenly
Are you going to have to go rock skis, or is it like St. Patrick's do anything? I know what a saw miser is, and I think it's like wood miser. Yeah, well, that's what I thought it was, and I just because I remember watching YouTube videos about those things about 10 years ago.
Exciting.
And it just, when you're talking, it makes me think.
to the office.
Somebody can make wood products while somebody's shipping it. You know.
We have a meeting.
And for our workforce panelists,
All right, I'll keep you posted.
make your way up to the front stage.
Touch the nerve. I did my job then.
Bye, guys. Drive safe. Yeah. Hopefully you have your snow tires.
We're gonna leave them on.
Is it better with the light on?
Yeah, we're gonna leave them on.
If you don't mind taking a seat, we've got one
There's
more
a globe one.
panel.
I know. Yeah, the disco ball.
Yeah, one of these. Okay. You are standing right in front of the camera.
Thank you so much. We've got one more panel, and it's been such an exciting day. Thank you all for joining us. I'm gonna wait. My name is Hillary Tellison. I'm the Workforce Development Director at Valley Vision. And I'm really pleased that we get to do a panel that's on workforce needs in this growing industry. But before I start, I want to introduce our panelists. We have Chris Quijano, Director of Operations from Rio Bravo-Rocklin. He's in the, thank you for waving, because I'm just going in order. I could go this way though, because we all know Kerri is sitting on this panel as well. She's going to speak to workforce. She's from the Regional Forest Health. She's a Regional Forest Health Coordinator at the County of Placer. And then we have Becky Rowe from the Foundation of California Community Colleges. She is the Senior Manager in Climate Strategies, and she just last minute joined our panel, which we're pretty stoked about.
Keep it interesting.
Justin Britton, Forester 2 at Wood Products and Bioenergy from CAL FIRE. He's the one who told us that we had an expert in Becky sitting in our audience, so asked us to have her join the conversation. I'm going to move my enormous water bottle down. Okay. Anyhow, our first question, or first thing that we'll have everyone answer is we'd like you to introduce yourselves, tell us your organization and your work in the forestry sector. Kerri, I'm going to have you start, even though you already did a bunch. I'll have you briefly go over your role.
No, thank you. I do play multiple roles, and so in this case, I am a project manager for a 22,000-acre forest health and wildfire risk reduction project in Placer County, in the headwaters of the Middle Fork American River. This is where the Placer County Water Agency's water source is. And we have come together, the county, the water agency, and 5 other partners, including some nonprofit organizations, Sierra Nevada Conservancy, academic institutions like UC Merced, who are looking at how forest treatment can have an impact on water quality and supply and those sorts of things. So these partners have come together to accomplish roughly 12,000 acres worth of treatment. Part of it is mechanical, hand thinning, mastication, tree felling, so forth. And half of it was intended to be prescribed burning, although as we get into some of the challenges, I think we'll talk more about that. Thank you.
Hey everyone, Chris Quijano with, I'm actually with IHI Power. We operate the three biomass plants here in California. One here local in Lincoln, Bravo-Rocklin, another one down in Fresno, and then one up in Jamestown, up near Sonora. I've been in this industry almost 20 years now. It's kind of hard to believe. I want to kind of thank the group for putting this together. I've been in some of these when there was like 12 of us in the room to where it is now. It's grown a lot. So definitely, it's been good to get more education out there and get more people involved in what is obviously a big problem here in California. That is the key. That's how you start these things. That's how you get people involved and get the money we need to get the material out of the forest, out of the fields, that kind of stuff. Let's see. Yeah, you know, I actually worked at Bravo-Rocklin for 16 years. I worked my way up from the bottom up to plant manager there, and then recently went over to the corporate side, but continued my work in the biomass industry here in California. So.
Good afternoon. I'm Becky Rowe with the Foundation for California Community Colleges, and thank you for allowing me to crash this party. But my background, workforce development, I just joined the foundation this past summer. Previous to that, I was with Shasta College up in Redding and a director of forest health. So responsible for our heavy equipment logging program, which was the first of its kind with funding from CAL FIRE, forest health programs before the business and workforce development grant programs were a thing. As well as focusing on CDL truck driving, because recognizing that the entire supply chain from a workforce development perspective in the forest products industry needs to be considered, because any bottleneck at any one of those points kind of can derail the entire thing. So, happy to be here.
Good afternoon. Sorry, Becky, for dragging you up here. My name is Justin Britton. I'm a forester, CAL FIRE's Wood Products and Bioenergy team. I'm sure most of you know CAL FIRE, but our team, I guess the work we're most notable for is our business workforce development grants. So on the business development side of that, we are trying to address a lot of the challenges that we've heard about most of the morning, and on the workforce side, we support training programs for the forest sector. And I've been working with Becky since I started, 2019.
We started together.
That's right.
Justin, I'm going to have you just hold on to the mic there so you'll answer the next question. But I mean, for those of you that don't know, Valley Vision does a lot of work with workforce, and a lot of people in our audience right now are from community colleges or workforce investment boards or represent job training organizations so that we can achieve those co-benefits that we've been talking about throughout the day, about how the people in our communities can actually get jobs in this growing industry and can improve their lives while they're thinning out the forest. But Justin, our next question is, what are the key occupations and skills needed for the work you do? What positions do you have the most difficulty filling?
Sure, yeah, I can speak to that from two perspectives. One, from my perspective as a forester, I know there's a couple other registered professional foresters in the room. It's a pretty, to become a registered professional forester, there's a pretty strict training path and experience requirement. And then I know Tanner was here. If you're a forester with CAL FIRE, and I know Glenn's here too, you get to be a forester and a firefighter, so it's double the training, so that's exciting. But from my perspective in managing a workforce development grant program, we see lots of proposals come through. A lot of successes in like the forestry and fire technician training programs. I think that success is likely due to the sort of the public-facing nature of the wildfire problem, and folks want to become engaged. What I see the most challenge in, and what I hear from the industry, is folks filling the highly skilled positions in the manufacturing sector, and these trades aren't necessarily specific to forestry, but that would be like your electricians, your millwrights, and saw filers and such. And that's one where sort of a topic area where we haven't seen a lot of proposals come through. And it's unfortunate that SBI couldn't be here today, but you know they've had some sort of in-house workforce training programs that they've developed because they see the need in their own facilities. So maybe in the future we can get them to talk about those.
Excellent. Thank you, Becky. I'm going to ask if you could give us a response to this, the occupations and skills needed for the biomass industry, and what positions do you see there being difficulty filling?
Yeah, and so at the foundation, we have a program called Resilient Careers, California Resilient Careers in Forestry, and that's a collaborative award. It was one of, I believe it was one of 32 out of 509 proposals for the US EDA Good Jobs Challenge. And so that was a statewide forest sector with programs that really span the sector. 5 funded community colleges throughout the state that the foundation is the lead on, and has some other specific goals and objectives, like raising awareness of just these career pathways, sort of creating a hub and a resource for being able to identify where training programs may exist in rural forested communities, and kind of tying all of those things together to that workforce development opportunity, that rural economic development opportunity. As far as biomass, kind of putting my hat on with Shasta College, and previous to Shasta College, I did workforce development for Sierra Pacific, so I just get to fill in all the spaces. But previous to that, when biomass, one of the things, the thing that really came up was the transportation piece, and just being able to that, even if you are able to successfully figure out the funding piece to make a pencil, like how are you still going to be able to have enough CDL drivers to be able to move that material? That's just been a challenge. It's been a challenge with post-fire recovery. It's been a challenge just across the board. So Shasta College took a look at expanding kind of an almost off-the-book CDL training program that we would just turn on once in a while for a student that was here or there, and really expanding that with funding from CAL FIRE in that initial grant, and then continuing to grow that CDL training program in a way that made it cost effective and affordable for students. So we were also reaching those underserved populations and diversifying that workforce within those rural forested communities. With anything else, it takes a while, but I know Shasta College, I was working on this before I left, but I believe within the next 2 weeks, they are holding something that we've had in development for about a year and a half, of log truck driving specific. So not chip vans, but log truck driving specific training. So that was something that was kind of like, first get the CDLs and then let's move into some of those more specialized skills trainings. I just think any training that you do though, any programs that anyone is setting up, I would urge them to think about making sure that they're built on a foundation of transferable skills. Anything within this space, it's constantly changing. Priorities are constantly going to shift, and rather than having to re-identify a new type of workforce, if we're strategic, if the workforce developers and the economic developers and the business developers and the innovators and the policymakers are all talking, then strategically thinking about what will those skill sets look like that build upon one another so that we're serving that workforce, that we're training, but also being able to get them ready for the next thing that comes.
Yeah, I think that's a great point about building cross-industry sector skill sets that can be applicable to different fields. But Chris, can I have you weigh in on positions you have difficulty filling or skills that you're seeing needed?
Absolutely. So in the power industry, in the power generation industry, there was a time that for entry level, this is the pre our favorite time, COVID, right? We were getting 80, 90 applicants per job. We're seeing like 12 to 15. So a lot obviously changed during COVID. But so our company's been looking into it and like why are we seeing just this difference in the workforce? Do they not want to work at? I'll be honest, working at a biomass plant is not this glorious, like clean job that you get to, go home and you're filthy, right? It's just the nature of working with that type of technology. So we've been looking at, I'm a Cal Maritime grad, they now have a facility operations degree there now, working with them, getting internships there, and then also for the long game, getting STEM back into our schools, really understanding like, we need people to do these type of jobs, and unfortunately it's getting removed from our schools. So we've been in partnership, we have a Diversity, Respect, and Inclusion Council with the NIHI Power. We've been reaching out to schools, trying to get STEM. What can we do to help you get STEM back in your schools? So that's a long game. Short game is reaching out to technical schools to get people in. And then also having tours and showing people, when you plug your phone in the wall, where does that power come from? A lot of people don't understand that.
Do you mind if I keep it on you for just a second? When you're saying technical schools, what kind of programs are you pulling applicants from those technical schools?
There's the facilities operations degree out of Cal Maritime. The other maritime schools across the nation, I think, are following suit on that. And there's other smaller schools of school out, it's kind of east, it's called Williamson. They actually train power plant operators. They do that. Now there's many schools like that in the nation. It's unfortunate because I've seen a lot of people come in the industry and just leave because it's not glorious, And you get a lot of people that like, oh, you make power and you work at that dirty power plant. And that's not the case. At the end of the day, we all enjoy having our power, and that's important to us. So.
Absolutely, it's a critical occupation. Kerri, can I have you weigh in on what the key occupations and skills needed are from your perspective?
Sure. First of all, I can't emphasize enough what Becky already said about drivers, haulers, and where our project is up in the headwaters in the Middle Fork American River. There's basically one road in and one road out. Much of it is not paved. It's very windy. There are recreational users and other people who are not expecting to see logging trucks on that road. It's dangerous. It's been closed. It was closed for an entire season because of sedimentation and road washout. So, not only is it we need people with driver's licenses who now know how to drive a truck, they need to be able to drive a truck under really adverse conditions. So that's another part of the learning there. Just like an anecdote, one of our timber vendors had 6 haul trucks sitting in the yard, only one driver. That doesn't help increase pace and scale. They have the equipment, that's like really expensive, they have it, but they didn't have anybody who could drive it. And then when they put out a position to try to hire more drivers, out of 10 applicants, only 9 were able to get insurance. Only 6 had actual driver's licenses that they could show. And of those 6, 2 were fake. So, I mean, it's not even getting people to show up, it's like, can they actually, can they do it? So, but that said, I'd say the hardest part we have, speaking from a project manager out in the field, is the field operations folks. There just aren't enough of them. Again, the conditions are not ideal. Many of our vendors have to camp for weeks at a time because the commute in and out to the site is just too long. But then there's a whole other like slew of people that you don't really think about unless you're managing this work. Legal, contracts, policy, to be sure that the policies are sufficient and we have funding coming, grant writers, grant administrators, project managers, people who are actually out in the field interfacing with the vendors, registered professional foresters, administration and finance people to deal with contracts and invoicing and reporting and tracking money coming in and money going out. So, you know, it's really easy to focus on the field work and the people with the saws and with the trucks and with the chips, but they are supported by a vast universe of people with other skill sets. So you could be interested in the outdoors, in forestry, in wildfire, but play a very different kind of role than what many people think about.
Excellent, thank you. It sounds like we heard from 2 people about the early engagement or that kind of hands-on training, because it's, I don't want to say dirty, I want to say a different word will come to me, but our next question, and Kerri, I'm just going to keep it on you for the ease of passing the mic back and forth. Can you tell us what you feel are the current challenges? I know you had an opportunity to speak about that earlier, but this is more workforce related. What are the current challenges facing the biomass industry, and how is your company or agency working to address them?
Crying every night. Yeah, we've talked about so many of them. Numerically, lack of vendors to go after bids and provide reasonable bids for procurement of services. Even though there are a number of vendors out there, they might not have the right equipment to do all the different types of work that's necessary. For us, again, the really remote nature of some of our projects in the headwaters of these river systems. We also have an issue with the landowner who underlies the land that we're working on, the Forest Service, and that is that they have something called the project activity level. Some of you might be familiar with this, where they determine, based on a calculus that looks at weather conditions and fire potential and risk and amount of resources that might be available should a fire start, based on the work that's being done in the field to mitigate and reduce fire risk. They come up with what level of activity a vendor is allowed to do on any given day in the forest. And we have just had so many restricted days that we've actually had vendors cancel our contracts and leave, hence the crying every night. Whiskey also helps, by the way. Which has been devastating to our project. Our project was meant to be done in about 5 years. We're heading into season 7 and we're going to need at least 1 more year after that, which has its own slew of issues because now contracts are getting extended. They're getting extended at the initial pay rate, which is no longer adequate. So now we have to go out and raise more funds or do fewer acres. It's a really difficult situation, and I believe that one of the main problems there, and this for any of the policy advocacy wonks in the room, this is a place where we could do some good, I think, is that the Forest Service does not fully indemnify the individual staff person who makes the call as to what level of activity is allowed on any given day. So you can imagine, because we've had a few situations where prescribed burns have gotten out of prescription, they've gone further than they were meant to. In some cases that's actually been beneficial, but you know, when it's happening, everybody is in an uproar. And the individual human being who said, yes, you can, the conditions are right, you can do that prescribed burn today, that person is actually individually liable. in what universe does the federal government not indemnify their personnel to do the work on their land? So again, there's just, you can't even imagine sometimes the nuances and the number of different things that go into decisions and go into creating the challenges that we're all facing.
Does that keep people from wanting that position, that they're completely responsible?
Yeah, you wonder why, you know, in the Tahoe National Forest, which is my national forest, we've had 3 supervisors in the past year. The one who had been there for the longest, he got kicked upstairs, he's working in DC now, and they just have had these like 180-day rotations of people into that position. I'm sure that part of it is that difficulty of, you know, not wanting to be held. Now, it's way more complicated. The federal government does provide some support and legal support and whatnot, but the underlying issue is that that individual has some individual liability. So yes, I would imagine that does factor in. Plus, just and this is very parochial for me because all of my projects are on Forest Service land right now. But you know, the practice in many federal government agencies, I think the Park Service does it too, of moving their personnel regularly through positions, I guess to get more experience in different places, which is great, but for those of us who are trying to build relationships and, you know, trying to tackle difficult challenges, you really can only do that if you have a relationship with somebody. And if it's a new somebody every 90 to 180 days, it makes it really hard.
Yeah, I can imagine. Thank you. Chris, could I have you respond to what are the current challenges facing the biomass industry, and how is your company or agency working to address them?
I think the biggest challenge on the power side, biomass, the power side, is long-term contracts. There's a lot of plants unfortunately shutting down. Actually, just this morning I got an email. Right now there's 21 operational plants, the largest scale plants here in California. I was looking at that list. 5 of them have unknown futures. 5 of them are probably more than likely going to shut down. That's going to put us down to 16, right? But do the math. So at one point, for those that have been on some of my tours, you know, we talk about how much wood each of these plants use. It's enough to fill the Rose Bowl on an annual basis. You know, we can say 200,000 bone-dry tons. What does that mean? Can you imagine what that looks like? I'm going to give it to you. It's fill the Rose Bowl. And we do that in our industry, 23 Rose Bowls annually. Plants are going away. My industry is shrinking. What are we going to do as Californians with this material? And part of that is, you know, the new technology that's coming on board. But I think the challenge we're seeing right now is there needs to be a point where we can sustain operation of our power plants until the next wave shows up. Because I'm a firm believer the next wave is going to show up. And they're going to need us to help support, build the infrastructure. We know the players in the game. We know where the fuel is. We know how to supply it. We're going to pass the torch on to them at some point. Is that going to be in the next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? Who knows? But if these plants keep disappearing, there's going to be this huge gap. And as it relates to workforce, when I go to hire someone and I tell them, oh, by the way, there's only 2 years left in my contract, why would I work there? Why would I change, move jobs, go somewhere else to work in an industry that's disappearing? So that's part of the challenges that we're seeing. How we combat that is me being here, you know, talking about this, making sure people understand that. At the end of the day, as Californians, we need what I'm doing. It might not be for the long picture, I'm fine with that, but right now we need it because we don't have another answer at our scale.
Yeah, absolutely, thank you. Becky, can I have you respond to that question about the current challenges facing the biomass industry and how the California Foundation of Community Colleges is working to address them?
Yeah, first I want to say, I think I want to hang out with Kerri for tears and whiskey. That sounds pretty good. So I think, you know, we're trying to look at expanding the talent pool. Traditionally, this industry is very male-dominated, and there were lots of different reasons for that in, you know, decades ago. Technology has completely reset the stage there. Applied technology removes those, you know, some of those physical requirements, the physicality of some of the work. And so that means there's 50% talent pool that really has traditionally been untapped. So thinking about how to expand awareness across the state. There's also where our highest population densities, they are not in rural forested communities. So also expanding that awareness into more densely populated areas. And then the last thing, just to touch on, what Chris was saying, and I feel that pain. I've long been an advocator of all the funding that's around right now to do workforce development, and whichever part of the sector you want to talk about is great, but without having some sort of market activation to really address the long-term problem, the short-term funding solutions are just setting everything up for failure, and it's going to make everybody even more hesitant to jump in the next time something comes. So that market development activation is really, really critical.
Thank you. Justin, can I have you take a crack at that? The challenges facing the biomass industry.
Sure. Yeah, I think Becky set me up for success there, because half of what we do in our grant program is support market development. So thanks for teeing that up for me. But what I wanted to talk about was, going back to the million-acre strategy. If Erik was his name from CARB was here, I think they're saying 2.3 million perhaps is in the latest scoping plan, which is just an unfathomable amount of work that needs to get done. So I think just that challenge alone is somewhat intimidating. How is my agency working to address that? In the last 8 or 10 years, CAL FIRE has been the pass-through entity, essentially running grant programs that has put hundreds of millions of dollars out to get work done in the forest through various grant programs. And in 2019, when I came to CAL FIRE, those programs had just started, and then we were hearing back from the folks that were running these projects that said, we need more people. And if we had facilities to take this material to, we could lower the cost of treatments. And so those two bottlenecks were what drove the department to start our wood products and bioenergy program, which is where I'm at now. And so we're trying to tackle that issue. And just to put some numbers to it, our business and workforce development grants started in 2022, and since that time, we funded over 100 projects and put about $125 million in grants out there. So lots of good stuff going on, and that's encouraging.
Thank you. Did you hear that? $125 million of grants. That's a lot of investment. This is going to be the speed round, so we can get to Q&A from the audience. But our final question is, how do you see your work or the industry changing in the next 5 years or more? If you give a response to that. And remember, considering we're going to try and get to the Q&As out in the audience.
I'm going to take an optimistic position here and say that the industry's taken off and that my role has shifted, that some of the issues that other folks were talking about with grants not being the solution. So we have a market that's functioning, that's attracting workers, and it's grown new businesses, so that my role will have shifted into something other than what it is now. And maybe that's just as a facilitator, or trying to help people find feedstock, or hopefully that's the case. So that's my prediction.
Thank you. Becky?
My prediction is that at the foundation and with our Resilient Careers in Forestry project, we're going to continue to expand awareness across the state, connect, change the dialogue around what these jobs are, and for folks that have never heard of them before, and really connect and resonate with kind of their own personal values in alignment with the social values and benefits and co-benefits that doing this work brings.
Thank you. Chris?
I mentioned just moving to the next technology. I think getting past, like Gloriamar said, the valley of death, going from scale to demo. I think that's going to happen, hopefully in the next 5 years, and that'll be exciting. And passing the torch on, that's kind of what I see. So.
Great. Thank you. Kerri?
And I'm going to hope that the aggregation efforts through CalFrame and the 5 different pilot projects are going to bear fruit, and that we will be able to support long-term contracts, which will encourage investment, which will bring us more facilities, which will provide places for people who get training to go work, and help us get our arms around this problem.
Wow, that sounds great. I'm all behind these ideas here. I'm gonna ask those folks, do you want to take my mic here? Okay, great. And we're gonna open up to you guys.
All right, folks, we have time for 1, maybe 2 questions before we close out here. So, any questions? Yeah, Matt?
This is really not biomass, but it kind of is. I don't think we're using all the tools in our toolbox. You know, 50 years ago, I had a good friend who had 10,000 head of sheep. And he'd go up the Sierras, start the Valley Floor, work all the way up and work all the way back down by the fall. What do you think 10,000 sheep, 10,000 head of sheep? And he wasn't the only one. Guys with cattle, sheep. Why are we not doing more of this? Because that's a biomass tool. It's just a smaller unit machine.
I can say real quick that the Placer County RCD is using goats. And I know there are other people who are using goats as well. It's especially good for maintenance. Once you've gone in and done an initial treatment, then, you know, in, not opposition to, but in comparison, not in comparison, in addition to prescribed burning, goat grazing and other animal grazing has started to pick up for us.
Yeah, my only thought there is, if you walk in an overstocked stand, there's no browse, there's no food, you know what I mean? Like, so I think, like Kerri was saying, as a maintenance treatment, it would make sense. As more sunlight is hitting the forest floor, we're getting feedback on the landscape there.
All right. Yep.
In addition to workforce training per se, I'm gonna, I think my Sierra Business Council colleagues left to get back up the hill, but they are helping to sponsor a forest entrepreneurship training, and there's flyers on the back table. This is for anybody who is interested in starting or expanding in a forestry type business of any sort. They're really good at this kind of training, answer questions, what are the first steps, what kind of funding do you need to have, just all kinds of things. It's a 2-day training. It takes place in Auburn, and I would encourage you to take a flyer in case you know of anybody or run into anybody who you think might be interested in starting up or expanding a business that can help us get ourselves to pace and scale. The problem is huge, and we are not quite equipped to deal with it at scale. Thanks.
Excellent, thank you so much. I'm going to pass it back to Caitlin. Okay, thanks, Sarah. Pass it down. Thank you, Hillary, and thank you to our panel members who took the time to be with us today. I'll let you all get back to your afternoon seats, whatever pleases you. And I'm going to invite my colleague, Adrian Wren, Senior Project Manager, Adrian Wren at Valley Vision, and Renee John back up to the stage to close us out here. And you guys get 2 microphones here.
We get 2 microphones. How cool is that?
Pretty
well,
cool.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Woo-hoo. We're almost at the end of our event, but we are here to close it out. Me and Managing Director of Valley Vision, Renee John. So thanks for the intro, Caitlin. My name is Adrian Wren with Valley Vision. I have the privilege of staffing our Cleaner Air Partnership Work, which is a regional collaborative of government, business, and the community working together for cleaner air in the region. We have our co-chairs over here, Erik White, who just started talking to somebody, and Debbie Wells with CEMEX. So Placer Air District CEMEX, thank you guys for being here. Really do appreciate it. And really appreciative of kind of the cross-section of folks we have here today from government, business, and the community. This is what it's all about. And it's really difficult to get that cross-section of folks in the room together to talk about solutions sometimes. So I've been scribbling some notes, some things that I've heard over the course of today, and I just want to leave you guys with some thoughts. And I'm going to invite Renee to add to these thoughts. So I loved hearing about this need for continued education and coalition building, and just building a baseline understanding, right? It's like, If I'm drawing a cloud, you guys are drawing a cloud, we're gonna draw different clouds, unless we've gotten a 3.5-hour training about clouds, right? Then maybe our clouds will look a little bit more similar. And so now I feel like we all are sharing this baseline understanding of what the issues are and then what we can seek to do in our communities and regionally. Loved hearing about this, not all facilities are, the cookie cutter thing that we all think about, the big smokestack. There are big scary ones that are valid community concerns about, and then there's new technologies that are really exciting. And I also wrote down in my notes, go to Europe and check out some of those cool technologies. So, Martin, what are a couple of the countries that are doing really cool stuff?
Germany, Austria.
Sounds like a great trip. Sounds like a great trip. Let's go.
Wants Valley Vision
Let's
to pay
go
for
check
it.
that
That's
out.
what he's banking on right now.
Yes, please, Managing Director Renee John, please. The subsidy conversation was really interesting. It is really important to understand, I think as Erik White pointed out, that the electricity industry, all these other industries, the renewables industries, have had all these big subsidies that biomass hasn't necessarily had. We have big opportunities from the state, the carb scoping plan, purchasing, other things that they can help de-risk investments. Those tribal partnerships, it's really important to understand that tribes have unique abilities. They have, there are more limitations for non-tribal entities, for example, and we need to be ensuring that we're partnering with tribal folks who've been stewarding the land for so long. I loved hearing, I think it was Liz Betancourt who talked about the $3.1 billion in public health costs annually that our state is facing by way of these wildfires. I think that's so crazy. But also just appreciated the need for the community conversations from the start, if we're planning this work, the need for forward-thinking trainings and connecting with folks from Shasta College, and then just better understanding, like Kerri said, there's all this other stuff besides the folks in the field. There's the legal, there's the grants, there's the contracts, the admin, all that sort of stuff. So all of these things are really important as we think about what we can do regionally. And I want to make sure that Renee has time to add. Go for it, Renee.
Oh, thank you. I'm not sure that I think quite as fast as you do, but I did pick out some 3 main points that really resonated with me. First of all, this is sort of aside from the main point, was really a need to talk about the economics of biomass utilization and what makes sense and what doesn't. I think that's further, kind of a further assignment to Valley Vision about how to dig into that, maybe with all you folks in the room. But some key points that stood out to me were really proper evaluation of the emissions versus not removing the forestry products. And I think that was very consistent, really how the evaluation's going. And you really talked about that we're really considering the trade-offs and that processes are improving and helping get rid of maybe old mindsets that are related to older processes. And similar to that, where the co-benefits of biomass utilization was talked about quite a bit, and looking at the full package, again with the trade-offs of not doing it, and really making sure we're educating folks when it comes to that, and just the myriad of problems that are solved by investing in this. And then thirdly was the importance of investment and policy levers in order to advance the work. So noting especially the historical levers as it related to solar and wind that were brought up several times, and if that had occurred, as it was related to biomass, that may have moved that industry further faster, and so that is some to consider. It's always challenging to fund something that's a proactive measure versus a reactive measure. Unfortunately, that's just sort of the way a lot of our systems are set up, but we do have the history of wind and solar to look at for what would happen if we invested more in this, and now seems to be the right time to have some additional momentum in that space. And then I lastly just wanted to highlight that when we did our regional plan, or updated the regional plan for We Prosper Together, which is again an 8-county inclusive regional economic development plan. This was seeded by California Jobs First, so this was really the state's investment in regional economies coming out of the disparate impacts of COVID-19 and saying, how can our regions do better? We want to give you a bunch of planning dollars, we want you to do a bunch of research, and we want you to do a bunch of community engagement. We want you to bring that information together and come up with a better plan for your regions for economic development that raises disinvested communities into the pipeline for quality jobs more effectively, and teases out key areas for economic opportunity and high quality jobs in your region. When we did that work and analysis for our region, there were 4 priority sectors that were elevated for us, And one of those was working lands, and within that biomass utilization came up that could benefit at least 3 of our more rural counties. So in that vein, I want to let you know that in the very short future, hopefully by the end of this month, at the very beginning of December, we will be releasing $9 million in pre-development funds that are available for projects that are advancing in one of the priority industry sectors. So I encourage you to take a look at that. That will be on our website. It'll also come out in all of our newsletters. If we don't have your contact information, Connor, if you raise your hand over there, you can give him your business card or contact information. He'll make sure you're notified. But that's going to be coming out, so something for y'all to take a look at. And I think finally, I just want to close with a hearty thank you. We originally started looking at this event as doing something maybe just in workforce. And then we started talking about the workforce elements, and that led us to the clean air impacts. And then we started talking about climate mitigation, and we said, let's bring everybody together and have a big old conversation and figure out as much as we can about this so that we're moving forward together and we can maybe get somewhere. So we definitely heard from our planning team, our steering committee, that action is needed and not just talk. So this won't be the last time you're hearing from us on this issue, because we want to try to move the ball down the field instead of just talking about it. But thank you so much for being here and spending your afternoon with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Just really wanted to underscore that work with Reprosper together. We're actually doing a convening tomorrow. What time is it tomorrow? 2 p.m. virtually, where you guys can get more plugged into those pre-development dollars. And so again, Connor, prepare for a flood of people to come, because that's happening virtually at 2 p.m. via Zoom, if you guys are interested in learning more about that. And then as mentioned, you know, Valley Vision has the privilege of staffing all this other work that's highly relevant to this work. You have our commitment that we're going to keep moving the ball forward through this work, and understand that you guys are all doing the same. I really want to express appreciation for that. Just a couple more thank yous. Want to thank the Folsom Community Center staff, particularly Sehar and Dustin. Let's give them a round of applause. Want to really thank the Valley Vision staff, in particular Caitlin and Kathy. Kathy, where's your hand? There's Kathy. Want to thank our Biomass steering committee members. Raise your hand if you're on our steering committee. Raise those hands high. Yes. Helped us plan this event. And then finally, all of you, thank you so much. Look forward to working with you guys.